you have to be learning in every way at any given point without judgment. You can take in the information, and I don't care where your credentials are from. I don't care if it's Wharton, Harvard, Kellogg, Stanford, whatever. That doesn't mean that what you're saying is useful or accurate or helpful. So you have to take that information in and you have to process it and judge for yourself. Like, okay, this sounds one way or another. How am I going to apply it? And is it something that I even want to apply?
And so today we have Seth on the show. And Seth is someone that I've been connected with on LinkedIn for a little while. And when I floated the idea of doing the show, he was very interested in coming on to talk about it. So we're going to be diving in with him. Seth, why don't you take the wheel for a second, tell everybody what you are, what you do, a little bit of your background, and kind of what you focus on inside of the work that you do.
Personally, I'm someone who has 20 years experience in sales and operations. And all throughout my career, I've always been focused on continuous improvement, continuing to iterate on what I've done in the past and make it a little bit better. And last year, I decided to take that experience to go out on my own and start a consulting practice called the Hypergrowth Project. And I really focus on revenue operations, business process optimization to help small businesses scale.
Man, okay, let's talk about that for just a minute, right? Because revenue operations is kind of, it's not really new, but it's like getting popularity. It's becoming like the new big popular thing. And, trying to take these very complex processes down to small business is a bit of a fight, right? Because they don't think of selling as a multi-stage process. They're oftentimes in small business, they're not concerned about tying sales results to churn events on the backside of it and the marketing on the front end of it. I'm curious, what makes you want to work with small business owners with this stuff? Like, what calls you in that direction?
It's really the same thing that drove me when I was, maybe looking for a new opportunity or a new job. I wanted to look for a company that I would be able to walk in and help build something bigger than myself, help grow something into something that was meaningful. And the reality is that when you are growing a business, when you have employees whose livelihood, whose families are dependent on what you're doing and success of what you do, it's way more meaningful than just a job. So it's something for me that I enjoy and I take pride in being able to help people create something better for themselves, for their families, for their employees and their employees' families. Because that's what happens. When you scale a business successfully and you do it efficiently, you now have built a foundation that can survive generations. And so that's what drives me to do that.
1,000%. And I love that. Small business is such an interesting realm, right? Especially compared to like enterprise stuff and bigger sales. But like these people, it's still the Wild West in small business and entrepreneurship and stuff like that. Especially when we're comparing it to like the complexity of like revenue ops and some of these bigger like enterprise organizations. So we got connected, and you brought up something in the conversation. You said that you were going through a program to kind of keep on that developmental path. Can you tell me a little bit more about the program that you're in, and what was the the motivation for seeking that out?
Sure. So I'm currently enrolled in what's called the Advanced Certificate Program at the Wharton School at University of Pennsylvania, and it's a program that is designed for executives. It's part of their executive education that is going to be practical, applicable, so that you can go through a class and immediately take what you've learned and apply it to your business and what you're doing and make an impact. I started with the program kind of on a whim, where in a previous role, we started to talk about growth through acquisition. And, it's starting to break into new markets, but nobody in the business had any experience in M&A, and myself included. So I immediately started to see, well, how can I do this? And growing up in Philadelphia, Wharton was always a kind of a big deal for me.
I bet. For sure.
You get into business and you grow up in the shadow of UPenn. I ran the Penn relays, when I was in high school. I ran track. And so that was one of the first places I looked. I looked at other business schools as well, but the program at Wharton kind of just spoke to me. So I specifically just started with the mergers and acquisitions class, and it was a little intimidating. And when I got there, it was extremely validating because I realized that I actually belonged there. I had the business acumen, I had the the ability to actually work in this sphere of accomplished individuals. And it was a fantastic experience learning from some of the top business minds in the world. So I really enjoyed it so much that when I went out on my own and I decided to start my practice, that I knew there's always going to be areas for improvement. I fully believe in never stopping learning. As a manager, I was always looking for ways to help everybody that worked with me and provide professional development to help them get better at what they did. So, I thought about it, like, oh, do I go back and get my MBA? And I thought about that a little bit more. And what I realized is that at this point in my career, the last 25 years is my MBA. I didn't know, I know how to do that stuff. I've built that expertise, but I wanted to have more current, more practically applicable knowledge. And that's what the program does. And it's been an incredible experience to continue that journey of refinement of my own skill set, while really meeting and interacting some incredible people from around the world.
Man, thank you, man. I love that because a friend of mine from here, he got into Wharton, and I had no idea what Wharton was at the time, but he was a super smart guy. He was, always talking about Japan. He'd learned Japanese himself. Like he was one of us. He was a nerd.
Yeah.
And and he was like, man, I got into Wharton. I was like, what is Wharton? And he was like, you don't know what Wharton is? And I was like, no, I don't. And that was my first kind of brush with it. And then I did some research, and holy crap, very prestigious school. And, I'm curious, you said something in there about you going into that room and sitting down with these people. It kind of validated some of your experience and everything. I think everyone on this path at a certain stage deals with things like imposter syndrome and, fake it till you make it kind of stuff. Did you carry any of that before this program? Does it feel different now? Like, is that something that you've struggled with in the past?
I still struggle with it. And I think if you're a high achieving individual, you always will.
I fundamentally like the minute I get comfortable in a situation, I'll push a little bit, I'll push for some growth, and I'll push up a level, and I'll start working with bigger clients, and then it'll be there again. And I can choose to kind of wallow in it, or I can choose to go prove it out that it's not going to be a concern. But I've kind of been wondering, like, the past maybe like year and a half, like, does it ever really go away? And I think part of the hallmark of being someone who's like constantly trying to improve is that it probably doesn't.
Yeah.
So
if it does, if you don't have that doubt, then you think that you're as good as you could be. You think the work that you're doing is as good as it will ever get. Yeah. And so if you're not doing that inner reflection, you're missing something, and you're not going to grow.
We're on the same page there, right? And it was always super frustrating to me being a strategic person and coming into some of these lower level sales opportunities and sales roles that I've been in, where there's no strategy needed. You just need to go out and do a whole bunch of it and stuff. And that's very frustrating to me because I always want to bring a level of strategy to my engagements and to my client work and stuff. And you can't be strategic in a sales role that doesn't call for strategic actions, right? You just have to go do a bunch of it. And so it was a bad fit for a very long time, and then finally found my lane. And now there's a greatness that happens, right? When you're a revenue professional is the label that I like to use, because there's founders who sell, there's salespeople who sell, marketers are, trying to figure out how to get people through the path, right? So these are all big performance roles, because if you can't do the job, you can't stay, right? There's a level of chaos that you're there to kind of manage and figure out and kind of plot the way through, and you either figure it out or you don't. And there's not always room for that. But I think whenever anybody finds the right type of sale at the right level, with the right market, with the right kind of process, I do believe that anybody can do this job and do it well. But
Yeah,
The hard part
absolutely.
is culture, incentivizations, and how people do these things and how it's taught and trained and coached and stuff. So transitioning a little bit, right? So coming out of the Wharton program, right?
Hmm.
I know you're still going through it. What has changed for you in your thinking about, your craft? Like, are there data points that you now hold as more important, whereas you didn't before? Like, how has your appreciation of the craft
Hmm.
for what you do changed with the knowledge that you're learning?
I think it's certainly been reinforced a good amount, with the idea of standardization, building something that's repeatable. In all the classes I've taken, more than once, it's talking about making it repeatable, and that's such a crucial thing in sales, because if you want to do it on a large scale, you have to have a process that is simplified and refined and is standardized, that can be repeated over and over again. Because if you're reinventing it every single time you pick up the phone, that's not going to be efficient. You're not going to be able to keep things organized.
Absolutely.
I,
Absolutely.
I'm a huge advocate for CRMs.
Same.
HubSpot in particular, although as it's gotten bigger, it's lost some of its allure personally. But
Really?
regardless,
I go
well,
the other way.
I think as it's gotten bigger, more features came in and it got great.
Yeah.
But now, as it's even the beyond enterprise level, it's getting more bureaucratic.
Oh, I
More
mean, 1000%. I mean,
more
it's,
division of
yeah,
features, and
yeah,
you get this but you don't get that, and like that is annoying me.
for
Um,
sure. Right. Like it's now, and it seems to me like it's now tottering on the same verge that like Salesforce is. Like you get it, you better have an admin who can run it. Right. Or
yeah.
else you're not going to get your money's worth out of it. You're not going to get the value out of it. And it's going to be a very expensive thing that you didn't ever actually implement and get the value out of. But like I had a very early experience with HubSpot and I hated it. Like had a really rough interaction with one of their sales guys. And I was like, okay, I'm not going to support this tool. And so I went in the pipe drive
Oh
direction
yeah.
whenever I first started. That was the first tool that I had worked with that was like helpful to me on my path. And so
Hmm.
that's one of the tools that we represent. And then we did a project last year with HubSpot, and it has come so far. Like I was
It
really
has.
impressed with it. So it's interesting to me to hear this kind of conflicting opinion that like it's now getting kind of like too big, right? They've lost some of the
Hmm.
greatness. That's very interesting to think about.
Well,
Um,
conversely, is that when I started working with HubSpot was 2017, so it was very very early on,
yeah.
and my skill set with the platform grew along with it.
Mhm.
So I remember it being lean and mean, and you're just super intuitive with everything. And I stopped short of calling it Salesforce esque, because it's not the shell that you have to bolt a bunch of things onto.
Yeah, it's a different philosophy than I think
Yeah,
Salesforce is ever going to be. It's
for
like
sure.
like the box is slightly different, right? Like they're trying to
Mhm.
be the same thing, I think, for different audiences and different approaches. But yeah, I try very hard not to call it Salesforce light, and stuff like that. But like that's where my thinking is with how I think about that tool now.
Mhm.
But okay, so going back to the idea of like standardization and stuff like that,
Yeah.
like big believer in sales process, obviously, right? Where do you think that people get sideways with building their consistency? Like, where do they jump the shark? Where do they get ahead of themselves? Put the cart before the horse with how you're thinking about things now.
I think the messaging is critical. Understanding what your audience is actually looking for, and trying to sell a product or service. You have to look at it as you're a problem solver. You're someone that's going to walk in and help somebody address a specific issue. Provide a product that is going to perform things that meets their business needs, whatever it may be. If you're going into a meeting with the mindset of I have to make a sale, I have to win this transaction, that's all it's going to be. And your demeanor, your tone, the way that you talk to them, that will come through. And it's going to be a high anxiety type of thing. They will likely have their guard up, and you probably won't get anywhere. You'll win some. There's some that you're going to win, but you're not going to be super successful. If you walk in with I'm going to try and help this person, or I want to try and build a relationship with somebody that will be long term, and we can be business partners. And when they thrive, I thrive. That's a different conversation. And your tone, your demeanor is going to be relaxed. It's going to be approachable. So I think that part is key. Is this stigma of what sales is, this negative persuasion. That part people don't focus enough on. And the process part comes down to time management. If you're gonna sell at a high level, you're gonna have more than you can reasonably keep track of, and that's why it's so important to have a system. Even if it's just a spreadsheet, you got to have something that's going to do it.
It's so funny, Seth. When I started this business, it was not to coach, it wasn't to do placements or recruiting or any of these things that I do now. I just wanted to build CRMs for people because it was the feedback loop that allowed me to like stop lying to myself, right? Because before I was just like everyone else, right? It's not my fault. It's bad leads. They don't get it. Everything else like that. But after playing poker and working with a coach and using some software that created a feedback loop, I improved based upon my ability to stop lying to myself. And so CRM, we were not using a CRM, and my business partner brought one in and said, "Hey, we should do this." And I was like, I've used these in corporate. They're garbage. They're big, expensive things. They don't ever work. And he goes, "Let's just try." And we were working with a sales coach, right? And the sales coach was talking about these things of, let's, build the system, how many deals in the pipeline, and everything else like this. And I was trying to hold it all in my head, which was creating obviously anxiety and obviously like kind of keeping me stuck where I was. And the CRM was my way through. And so getting people, so when I started the business, I was like, you need a CRM, you need a CRM, you need a CRM, you need a CRM, right? Like, hammer nail kind of situation.
Yeah.
But honestly, at this stage, I love it whenever someone has a spreadsheet, like something more than just choosing to let all this stuff live in our head, because we're not good at recall, right? Like we all think we are, but we're all trying to multitask and we're bad at that as well. And so like the CRM, but like just a list of your opportunities, right? Like coming from sales, like there's always the board, right? In these situations, there's always some big number sign, very clear picture of where you are and where you need to be. And you have to build that feedback loop, I think, in a way that makes it approachable for you. Because if it's not approachable for you, you'll just avoid it. You won't use it.
For sure.
And then all this other stuff. But I love now whenever anybody's doing anything, but when I started, I was you're not using a CRM. Like, well, come on, you're not even taking this seriously. Like, even if they had like a nice spreadsheet with like, some depth to it, like it still just wasn't enough. And now that now that I've seen how many people don't do anything at all, I'm just really glad whenever anybody has any structure to their process whatsoever, even if it's just like the beginnings of it. Because I think the other part that people don't talk about is they buy these big systems. They buy HubSpot and Salesforce, and they're going to go hire a bunch of salespeople and a cold email campaign and stuff, and they've not done that foundational work. And so then all of this is now just very expensive misses, because we've been trying to like do scalable ideas only, and no one's even had a conversation with anyone who's in the market,
Yeah.
So from your side of it, right, sticking to the standardization path, because I'm a nerd and I love it, what should people be standardizing? Like, or like if you're working with a client and nothing is standardized from the jump, like what do you kind of zero in on? Like, what do you kind of go after first as far as like standardization and like really trying to flesh out that process?
We have to look at everything as a whole. It's not just sales. It's not just operations, right? It's
agreed. Where
does the customer start, and where do they end, and everything in between, and even before and after that timeline.
It's so funny. So sorry to interrupt you. And I know that everyone hates this on podcasts. Like,
it's okay.
How many times have you been in a conversation and you want to kind of talk about like the messaging and the copy before the call, and people are like looking at you funny because it shouldn't matter because like you're just the sales guy, right? Like, this is what happens to me. And then also when I'm like, okay, like let's look at the onboarding process. Well, John, why do you care about that? Well, onboarding like creates the relationship past me. And if it sucks, like they're going to come back to me. So let's look at this. And then also I'm like, hey, what happens when people churn? John, why do you care about that? It's like, because this whole thing is like tied together, and the people who are leaving because we didn't do a good job. Right. So
at one point or another.
we did not meet expectation, right? Is what it
Yeah.
is. And so, especially in a service driven business, right? Like a product business is different, right? And you sell that differently, of course. But in service, like you have to qualify for that. You have to qualify for that standardization. And to my, like, that was the hardest thing for me because when I moved from corporate and then I moved into medical devices and did that for a while, and that was hard. And then I started to work with a buddy of mine on a small web project. And I was closing deals and bringing them in, and they were bad fits, like really bad fits. And then we brought on a project manager so I didn't have to do it anymore. And I was like, oh, this is going to be great. I can go sell more. I can go sell more. And I was making that person's life hell because I wasn't qualifying for fit. I wasn't qualifying for intention. I was just going around selling it purely on the basis of commodity. We're cheaper than the other people. And my business partner, one of my mentors, man, you gotta stop. I'm like, this is why you have me here, to like go close these deals. And he goes, dude, no, like they have to want it how we do it. And if they don't, you need to find the nicest, easiest way to break their heart.
Yeah.
And this was like the craziest thing that I'd ever heard before, Seth, because I was like, it's gonna be fine. Like they're gonna get what they need and everything. And it was such an interesting process because you have to be able to sell to your expectations and your differentiation, or else you are only going to be seen as a commodity. And the thing that you said earlier that I really liked about having a walls up, walls down conversation, their walls are going to be up when they are looking at this in the realm of commodity. You guys are all the same except for cost. Why would they come to a conversation with their walls down and have a great deep discovery conversation with us, right? There's no real need or pressure to it. You just want to sell me something. Whenever, we're trying to be like, hey, I'm trying to make sure you don't make a mistake, So does that ring true for you in your experiences with this? Like, do you get pushback when you want to look at the whole process as a whole? Do you get process when you start trying to talk about qualifying out in the name of standardization? Where, like in your work with your clients, right, in small business, and I'm happy to speak to mine, where does that friction show up for you?
It shows up often if I haven't done a good enough job in the qualification and discovery of the client. And that was something that I had to learn early on because, being a consultant was new to me. So flying that plane as I was building it. And, if I had a client that didn't understand why I was looking at the business holistically, they're like, I just want more sales. I'm like, okay, well, this is how we're going to do it. And often it would be a business that was too small to make the investment yet, and that's hard because you especially being in business for yourself, you understand that money's coming directly out of your pocket. So you have to be considerate and understanding. But it's getting all of those pieces to work together and deciding which one to work on first. And for me, I always approach the sales process first to make sure that they can keep themselves organized, that they can approach the process systematically. And then from there, it's all right, well, now if they have this process and they're selling properly and they're going to start making it rain, well, how are we going to support that new revenue coming in? And so now I start to look at operations and customer experience. I think customer experience is such a huge deal. There's a startup that I'm an investor and advisor in. It's called Urban Finance, something that's close to my heart. And the first thing that I did in working with them was start to review the customer experience in coming in and onboarding and working with the platform. And because if you don't have that customer experience, if it's not intuitive, if it's not low friction, you're out and you've just lost that potential relationship forever. So making sure that you have a good customer experience is really the name of that game. You have a good experience with sales. Your onboarding is easy and seamless, and when you use the product, platform, service, you're getting value from it without needing to put in a lot of effort.
Yeah, it's so funny. I know a lot of consultants who do different things and freelancers to RevOps consultants and stuff like this. And it's so funny because whenever people are new, I run into this idea. Well, that's not my problem. I'm telling them what to do. Well, they're just not doing it, John. And I'm like, you realize you're on borrowed time if that's how you're running around with it,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you should be, and I didn't do this very well in the beginning either, right? But you have to like want to figure out why it sucks for them, as opposed to just like kind of resting on your laurels and being like, well, it's their fault, they don't get it, right? Well, you sold
Yeah.
it to them, you took their money, you've been working with them this whole time, and now they're leaving, and like they're now the idiot. Like, come on, like we have to be better than that. And so that's the first place I always start as well. Like, I want to talk to your best customers, and if you have anyone who you think might be churning, I would love to have a quick conversation with them as well. And they're like,
Mm-hmm.
well, John, shouldn't you be closing new deals? And it's like, I can't close good deals until we know what a good deal actually looks like from the perspective of your clients and customers, not you. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
you know. Um, when Okay, hard question, right? Because you're a HubSpot guy.
Okay.
When should someone be jumping into a tool like HubSpot? Like, what are the early warning signs? What, like, when is the time to jump, in your opinion? Is it a revenue amount? Is it a headcount amount? Is it a, like, you've got product market fit? Like, when should small business be jumping into these more expensive tools?
I don't think there's necessarily a hard number, but because there's so many options that are free. You have the ability to utilize even HubSpot for free, and that jump point could be when the features don't meet your needs anymore, and you need to use some of the things that in that feature set that are going to help you do more. Or if the platform you're on is no longer meeting your needs, you need to look for another one that is going to meet your needs. So, because I think it's such a fundamental part of the foundation that you build to scale a business, that you have to have it from day one. Even if you don't fully get the use out of it yet, it's free. Who cares? It's when the feature set meets your needs and when it doesn't that you start to reevaluate it.
Okay, I like that. When Different question. In your opinion, when should someone be bringing on salespeople, and when should they be bringing on marketing and content? Like, how do you? And I know that there's going to be nuance and there's depth to it because every situation is different. But I'm curious, like, what are you looking for in those situations to like indicate, yeah, it's time to bring on some salespeople, or it's time to bring on marketing and content so that way it's easier
Mm-hmm.
for this person to sell? Like, do you have any thoughts about kind of like a standard process that maybe most people aren't doing but might serve them better?
I think founders should always be the first salespeople. There's a level of connection to the work and the day to day, and the passion, the purpose behind any company or service that has to come from the founder. So they have to do that, and I think that I'm sure there's examples contrary to this, but the most successful ones are going to be ones where the founder has been out there pounding the pavement.
Agreed.
And the point to bring in salespeople is when you have more business than you can reasonably keep up with. And so now, because there is a limit, whether we want to admit, you can say like, oh, there's no cap. There's always a cap. There's
Always a cap. Yeah.
yeah. There's only so much time in the day. There's only so many things you can do, right?
Yeah. You're only going to pay for so much server space. Let's be honest about it.
Yeah, exactly.
There is a cap for sure.
Yeah, and eventually you get the iCloud notification. You have to buy more storage.
But even with like these SaaS platforms and everything else like that, like there is a delivery component on SaaS, right? I mean, it's quite often pretty negligible because it's software driven, but there is still a cost, right? And with some of these more like bigger tools that are more customized from the get-go, if they're leaving as quick as they're hopping in, like someone is missing the points of differentiation here, right? That feature set is not connecting with the actual needs of the people who are buying.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, different question for you, right? Because we're just gonna get in the weeds now. I'm just gonna ask you a bunch of nerdy like sales nerd questions.
Okay.
What do you think the most important part of development is for a salesperson?
The most important part of development.
Yeah.
I think it has to be the mindset that I mentioned earlier, that you're there to help solve a problem. You're there to deliver value, not to sell a product. And the ability to articulate what that value is, that is the single most important thing. If you can't articulate the value of what you do or the product that you're selling, forget it. You're done. Your company's done.
Yeah.
And I actually, this is something I talked about on a podcast that I just recorded with Fahim Musa, who's really great at being able to articulate that value and helps others do the same, is that if you can't very concisely let someone know what the value is that you bring, that you're wasting their time. And they have a finite amount of time to do what they need to do. Mm-hmm. So if you can't show them how important what you're talking about is in a very short time frame, that they have to move on with their lives and do something that is valuable. Yeah. So being able to deliver a message that is information dense, concise, that illustrates the value that you can bring is absolutely mission critical.
There was one time that you're talking about being concise. There was one time I actually got turned down for a sales role because got through the interview process. This is the final interview. And it was for a SaaS tool. I don't remember what the realm was. This is before I started my company. And they're like, well, John, we don't really like you for this role. And I was like, okay, would love to know why. I'm fine. Well, you're not very succinct. And I was like, and? And I didn't get the role, but like, it just kind of speaks to this idea that everyone has a perception of like what's going to be happening in these conversations, right? And like even sales, right? It's very interesting, depending upon who I'm talking to. The how I talk about myself kind of changes a little bit, right? If I'm talking to a producer, hey, I'm a sales coach, right? If I'm talking to a founder, it's like, hey, I'm a sales process consultant, right? And then for some people, I'm not any of these things, right? And I'm a founder, which is very interesting. Usually those people just want to sell me stuff, which is very interesting.
But also for those two, you're also a therapist.
Oh, 1000%, man. Like I was supporting a team, and I give people a lot of room to vent about the uncontrollable. I don't give anyone room to complain about their bad luck, right? Because, in my development paths of being a martial artist and being a poker player and now doing the same that I do now, you need space to vent, as long as that venting is also a little bit like, hey, did I screw up? Right? Like,
yeah, where did I go wrong?
You're supposed to be reflective. You're supposed to be looking at it, And if you can't do that, like you're part of the problem, in my opinion,
Absolutely.
Okay, next question. When should a founder bring on a head of sales?
That is a very good one. And I kind of have conflicting thoughts on that idea, but when you have, and I've seen this more than once, where the founder typically is the one managing sales, but they're not a sales manager. They're and literally, and this has been said to me, is I'm a really bad sales manager. I haven't done anything. So when the running of the business is taking more time away from you than you're able to reasonably give back to the sales team, you have to look at it, because they're not going to be able to be held accountable. You're not going to be able to coach them. You're not going to be able to see the areas where they need to make adjustments in order to really grow and be successful.
I love that answer. Because like I hear the same thing, right? Like after a while, because in the beginning you can't, it's hard to get a founder to realize that they're wearing too many hats and there's too many things going on. And then, honestly, one of the things that I look for in my client work is like I almost want that founder to have the death grip on it, right? Because like if they have that death grip on it, it's because it's working. A lot of people, they reach out to people like us because it's not working and it's almost a sinking ship, and you got to be careful, right? With opportunity cost of being a consultant and everything, because if all your outcomes are garbage, it's very hard to continue to be, a known person in the marketplace, right?
Yeah.
So how do you vet for good client work? Do you have any tried and true questions that you have used to really just kind of like split that down the center of like, oh yeah, you're not ready, or no, I'm not the right one to help you? What do you look for to indicate that it's going to be a really great relationship?
I think it's a focus on the business itself as opposed to just sales.
Oh, interesting. Okay. I love that.
because as you're wearing all these hats as a founder, you have to recognize that they all matter. You know, like sales is the driving force behind the business. It's funding everything that is happening. But all that other stuff exists to be able to handle the new stuff that comes in. And so if you just focus 100% on sales and all the other stuff is from the dollar store, like it's not going to be able to, it's not going to work.
The dollar store. I love that.
You know, it's the Ferrari with a Pontiac engine. You know, it's you can't just pick one part of it. You have to have a perspective that this is holistic.
Ooh, I like that a lot, actually. Right? It's not just a sales problem. Okay, going back to the Wharton thing, right? Because like in our roles, if you're a sales guy, if you're a marketing person, if you're a founder, entrepreneur, or whatever, like you are developing yourself. Like you just have to be, you know.
Yeah.
And lots of people have opinions on coaches and courses and development paths and things like that. And I'm curious, you know, going through the Wharton thing now, right? Like you're very self-driven on your path of improvement and everything else like that. Do you look, does it matter to you if other people are kind of on that developmental path in your work?
It does. It does. Because if I'm going to work with a sales team, a core fundamental thing that I'm going to work on with them is professional development. It's for them to get better at what they do. I've always viewed my job as, you know, in a management type role, that it's not my job to manage you. It's my job to help you do your job better.
1000%. Yeah. And
the best way to do that is to help you improve in your skill set, to help you improve in the way that you approach your day to day. So you have to have people that have an open mind, and that is one of the main criteria I also use if I'm hiring sales reps. What I will use to vet them is, you know, are you willing to, you know, come in and do something different, or do you just want to come in and this is the way I do it, this is my way, I'm doing it, and you're not going to tell me otherwise? That's not going to work. You know, I'm not saying I know everything, but there's got to be a give and take here.
Yeah, for sure. Right. One of the best lines that I've ever heard in a sales interview. I did not get this role, but I did end up going to work at the organization in another location. And I didn't get the role because the guy decided to hire one of his buddies. But he called me and said, "Hey, man, I was going to pick you, but I've known this guy for a long time. We've worked together in the past. And, you know, like we can just hit the ground running." That guy did not last, which I found to be very interesting. But in the interview, he said this line. He goes, "John, you know, can we talk about one thing?" And I was like, "Yeah, of course. What's up?" His name was Bo. And he goes, "You don't have to do it my way. You can do it your way and be wrong, though." Right?
Yeah.
And I was like, I left that meeting and I didn't know how to feel about that line, you know, and it kind of like, does that mean I'm not going to get any training until I'm fit? Like, you know, it sounded important, but I didn't really know how to hold it or how to like think about it and stuff, you know. And now it's funny because I do reach outs and I'll talk to people. I'm always like looking to connect with other salespeople who might be looking for roles and everything. I'm not really a recruiter. I do more like placements because we do the build outs on the front, and I know what I'm looking for in the personality of the person that we're going to fit in that role. So it's a little bit different, but it's hard for me to get excited about bringing somebody in who hasn't put any effort into their own development, you know?
Yeah.
And everyone has, you know, in sales side, you know, you have these guys that are out there and they're selling these programs and they're guaranteeing that these programs are going to unlock a 6-figure income for you, right? And, you know, you see some of this stuff on LinkedIn, and then you see a lot more of it on Facebook and some of these other communities. How do you feel about that though? Right? Because I have a course, I'm a coach, you know, I work with people. I need to put people into roles who are going to be coachable and open, and they're going to work on themselves and stuff like that. But I don't have any requirements that people buy my program, right? If anything, they're going to get my program when they come to work for the client that I'm working for. Yeah. But I'm curious, like, how you feel about that, because there's some hot takes, hot opinions about courses and coaches, and is it worth it? And, you know, now you're doing this very prestigious level of, you know, educating and developing yourself. So I'm curious as to, you know, have your thoughts shifted on this at all? Is college more important to you now when you're talking to people? Is it still about that drive and that self-development? Like, how do you feel about it?
Well, so yeah, I'm in a program that you can, I guess, objectively be viewed as prestigious, but I'm also on YouTube and podcasts and LinkedIn, and I will go through entry level training courses or tutorials or whatever, because I might walk away with one piece of information that's like, maybe it's new, maybe it's oh my God, I can't believe I forgot about that. You have to be learning in every way at any given point without judgment. You can
without judgment is the hard part, right?
You can take in the information, and I don't care where your credentials are from. I don't care if it's Wharton, Harvard, Kellogg, Stanford, whatever. That doesn't mean that what you're saying is useful or accurate or helpful. So you have to take that information in and you have to process it and judge for yourself. Like, okay, this sounds one way or another. How am I going to apply it? And is it something that I even want to apply? So I think however you get your information, because I'm very fortunate that I was able to, because I self-finance. Most people have their companies pay for Wharton. I was fortunate to be able to do it myself. And I believed in that investment enough to make it, but not everybody has that ability, and there are other ways to do it. There are opportunities out there to learn from. And as someone who has gone down that path, I look for new information from all sources without judgment until I get the information. Then I make my judgment from there.
I love that. Okay, so let's dive into that.
Yeah.
Who do you, man, I have so many questions around here. Who do you follow? Who do you follow that you seem, that you're finding good information, not fluffy, not the same stuff that everyone else is talking about, but like they're really connected to their work and it's helpful with like the content that they're putting out. Who do you follow? Who do you like?
I think Chris Walker stands out for me. Former CEO of Refine Labs, now just started a new company called Paceto. He was the first person I saw that was really kind of challenging the status quo of what is expected in marketing, and especially the metrics that people are looking at. And so and his information is very data driven. I'm an analytical person. I'm all about data. So he's not kind of proselytizing about what's going on. He's looking at the information that he has compiled from his clients and sees what works, what isn't, and where the problems lie. So I think that for me is where, because admittedly, marketing has been an area where I needed to do more work on. I'm not a natural kind of in that space. And in fact, I failed in that space, and so that was part of what made me recognize, like, no, you really need to learn more on the marketing side. So that's helped.
I would love to dive into that for just a second. Sorry to like segue, but like I think that's a very interesting thing. You said you failed in the marketing component. Like how do you know that you failed? Like, what do you look at? What are the data points? Like, did you know you were failing, or is it what you have learned at Wharton that has showed you that you were just like on a path that was like impossible to win on? Like, how did you become aware of it? And then how were you adjusting?
Well, it was a combination of things. At the time, I was head of sales, and that I just kind of was naturally also the head of marketing. It just, in a small business, you wear hats. I had about 15 of them. That was one. And ultimately the results weren't there, so that was kind of black and white indicator. But in retrospect, and through, I would say perspective from, my professional development, is that when you get to a certain scale, certain size, you need to have more specialization. You can't be a Swiss Army knife across departments when you're managing a $50 million business. That's, aside from being a tall task, it's just not going to work well. There's too much that needs full focus for you to be able to have it divided.
That makes sense. Okay. So we're running out of time, so I'm going to jump ahead a little bit.
That's okay.
What's your favorite sales book?
Ooh, my favorite sales book. One that was recommended to me by a former employer was How to Become a Rainmaker. That kind of cuts to the core,
Yeah.
On the management side, the Five Dysfunctions of a Team.
Ooh,
You know?
that's a great book, man.
Yeah,
Patrick Lencioni, man, he kills it. Like
yeah,
Getting Naked is like one of my favorite books ever. Like really shattered a lot of my thinking and views on stuff. And then I just went on a tear. Like I read so much of that stuff. Okay, what about so we talked about sales, we talked about leadership, marketing side. Are there any marketing books that you specifically have found to be useful for you on your own path?
um, not specifically, unfortunately.
Hmm.
And I guess none have really spoke to me. Yeah, and I've read, I don't know, maybe half a dozen,
Okay.
and none of them really were like, oh yeah, that's great. But although and I'll probably get in trouble for this, but like my marketing professor from Wharton wrote a book that I still haven't read, but I need to. And he was the best professor I've had so far. Professor Raggio, he was amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So when he sees this clip, he's going to be very frustrated that you've not read it.
Yeah.
Um, what
I'm actually on campus next week, so I'll have to say something.
What do you think is the most outdated piece of advice that people are still like running around touting in sales and leadership and in marketing? Like, what have you found to just be like,
Ooh.
we got to stop saying this to people. We got to stop thinking about it this way.
Um, I don't know. I don't think I could say one thing because I'm so dismissive of some of that stuff. You know,
Same.
and you get immune to it because you get so many
Yeah.
cold emails and these like ridiculous robodials that
Yep.
I've kind of immune to it. Yeah, like some idiom that's just like antiquated. I don't know. I'd have to. That's the kind of thing. Like I have become so impervious to them that I don't even pay attention. So that's
Oh man.
sorry.
No,
Not a good
like,
answer, but
no worries, right? It wears me out to go read like all the sales savage stuff, right? Like,
Mhm.
don't take no for an answer and all this like outdated stuff. Like it shuts
Yeah.
down the ability to really be strategic and thoughtful and like solution focused, right? So I was curious if you had any of those that just kind of like your soapboxes of like, man, I can't wait for this to stop being like a guiding principle for, sales and marketing. Okay, if someone was coming in today, starting brand new, and they want to consult on growth,
Ooh. Yeah.
what advice do you give them? How do you shave off some of their ramp up time, some of their pain, some of the kicks on the teeth that happen? Like, what advice do you give someone who's brand new?
Spend the time to build out a structure that is repeatable. Because every discovery call that I was on, I was kind of making it up as I went, and I was stumbling, and I wasn't getting the right information. And I probably wasn't coming across as being very professional. So even like, understanding that initial structure you build isn't going to be great, but just have the structure together, so that you're hitting on all of these points and then build on it from there. And making sure to take the time to not cut corners and not let your clients force you to cut corners. You
Oh,
know,
yeah. We didn't even talk about the moral ground of what we do. And sometimes there's pressure
yeah,
to go take bad shortcuts. And it's like, you wouldn't want this used on you. Why are you
hmm
telling me to go do this on anybody else? Right?
yeah,
It's very
yeah.
fascinating. We didn't even get into that. So there might be a part two in the future, Seth, if you're open to coming back.
Of course, of course. It's been a great conversation, but I think for sure, if you have the conviction to be a consultant, then you need to stand by your own convictions in what you do, in knowing that no, I can't cut this corner. Has to happen for this reason. You have to know why. You have to
Yeah.
know why what you're doing is important.
That's
But
a
that
super
you
good
can't.
point because like
Yeah.
sometimes we're like I'm an introvert. I'm a reserved person. All of this is like adjusted behavior, right? And so sometimes this is why I talk so much about kung fu. Like kung fu is the process of taking reflexive ideas and training them to a place of intentional action, right?
Mhm.
And so I talk about this because my personality leads me to like I want to overthink everything, I want to avoid conflict, I want a system and a process, and I want very clear. And sometimes you're not going to get that, starting
Mhm.
out. And so I think it's important to know. I love what you said there, but you gotta you gotta know like what is going to work kind of for you. And then you also have to know, like, is that pull reflexive or is it intentional? Intentional. Because if it's intentional, cool, you've done the work. If it's reflexive, you need to kind of figure out why it's so reflexive. In my personal opinion, if you're going to be consulting and working with other people, I love that though. Seth, so we're going to be wrapping up here. I'm curious if there was anyone that you think I should have on this show next. Like, I don't know that I'm going to get Chris, but who would you like to see on this show? Who should I reach out to and say, hey, Seth sent me your way, would love to do an interview show with you? Who should I be reaching out to?
There is someone that I've connected with recently from the Philadelphia area. And he's part of Fractionals United, if you're familiar with that group.
I'm in that Slack community, I think.
Oh, okay, there you go. Tyrone Robinson is someone that has been doing consulting for a long time, and focuses a lot of that kind of stuff.
Awesome. I will gladly do a reach out and see if he wants to come on the show, and that way we can grill him just like I was grilling you on this. And Seth, man, I really appreciate you coming on. Like, we don't really even know each other. We're just connected on LinkedIn. Appreciate you being willing to hop in here and like really open up and talk about your path. Any last words, any calls to action, right? This is a co-marketing event kind of situation. So if people want to learn more about you and your work, or if they want to get in contact with you, where should they be going? How can they reach out?
So I'm obviously on LinkedIn. I have a website, hypergrowthproject.com. You can learn more about the services that I provide, really just focused on helping small businesses grow, scale, and build better opportunity for them and the founders and for their employees.
Awesome. Seth, man, I really appreciate it. We'll get this up and hopefully you get some cool conversations from it.
Thank you. I appreciate it, John. This is a lot of fun.
Talk to you soon.